Today is February 24th, 2009. We're at the home of Mr. Emanuel Magilavy at his home in Stow, Ohio. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for this interview today. Welcome, Emanuel, and thank you for participating in the project today.
My pleasure.
Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
I was born in Akron, Ohio, December 17th, 1919. I lived in Akron, going through schools, grade school and high school. After high school, I worked in various department stores and small clothing stores until I entered the service in 1941, August of 1941. I enlisted at what was then Patterson Field in Dayton, Ohio. My brother was already enlisted there. He had been in the service for several years, so.
Now, was he an older brother? Or, I mean, how many siblings did you have? And
I had 3 brothers and 1 sister. All the brothers were in the service.
now, this is prior to Pearl Harbor. What prompted
Yes.
you to enlist? Did you feel the war was coming on, or was just what prompted you to enlist? And
I wanted to choose the area that I was interested in the service, and the fact that my brother was stationed at Patterson Field. I went there to enlist, and I got to pick what section I wanted to be in instead of being drafted.
you felt though that eventually you were going to
I knew
you were going to get drafted.
Oh yes, it
Yeah.
was.
Now, why did you come to choose the Army Air Corps?
And my brother was in it.
Is that right? Yeah.
At Patterson Field, it was. Well, now it's called Wright-Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time we could enlist and pick the division or the area that we wanted to go to. And I stayed at Patterson Field until after Pearl Harbor. Then from after Pearl Harbor, I was transferred to the air base at Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We opened up the airfield, Billie Mitchell Airfield there.
Well, do you remember where you were and what you were thinking when you heard that Pearl had been bombed?
I was on my way between Dayton and Springfield. Another buddy and I were going to a movie. And we'd seen all the movies in Dayton, so we decided Springfield wasn't too far away. We'll drive up there. And as we were passing the Patterson Field, the main gate, we heard the news. And we decided, both of us said, well, let's not go back in. Let's continue on and have our last meal outside for quite a while.
Wow.
Which was true.
Proved to be true. Huh?
Oh, yes. It was, we knew that once we got back into the field, we'd be restricted, and we were. At that time, there were very few enlisted personnel at the 2 fields, so that the enlisted men had duties, guard duty, then the next night we'd have KP, then guard duty. There were so few men there. And I stayed at Patterson Field. At that time, I was a link trainer operator, and I trained pilots on link trainer, which is instrument flying.
Now, were you a pilot prior to entering the service?
No, I was not.
And had you started your pilot training there at Patterson?
No, I was transferred from Patterson Field to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then another airfield, Camp Williams, Wisconsin, when my orders came through for flying school.
Was that something you were trying to become?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
See, at the time that I enlisted or went to flying school, there were enlisted pilots. All that was required of you was to be an enlisted man in the service, and you had the same training as the cadets, the college graduates did.
Hmm.
So I went through as an enlisted pilot. The advantage, I drew my enlisted pay. The flying cadets didn't. They drew a cadet pay which was very low. And we enjoyed it payday when the few enlisted pilots would get their pay with a handful, and here these cadets come with a short pay, and they had to pay for different things that they got. So it made us feel pretty good. And I went from Wisconsin then to Maxwell Field, Alabama. That was my pre-flight training.
Now, had you ever, prior to this, ever been in an airplane before? Had you flown?
I as a passenger, yes, that's
okay.
I had been in the service. I was in a transport outfit, and after Pearl Harbor, it became a troop carrier. But as a transport outfit, the enlisted people could go for rides if they were free on weekends, and I took advantage of that. And I talked to one of the pilots, and I noticed that he was a staff sergeant, and that's how I found out that I could, as an enlisted man, get through flying school.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I went all the way through as a sergeant.
Did they end that program after the war started? Because I hadn't come across many people that were...
After the war started, an enlisted man could fly combat, not in a combat zone. He could not fly combat, I mean.
Okay.
So the Flight Officer Act was established. I graduated as a flight officer. That's the equivalent of
Earth mechanic.
A warrant officer junior grade.
Okay.
And in fact, I was a first pilot on a B-17, and the co-pilot, bombardier, and navigator were officers. They were second lieutenants, but I was still in command of the group.
Really?
I was to have, in England, I was to have gone to headquarters to meet a board to be accepted as a second lieutenant, but each time that I was supposed to have gone, I was on a mission. In fact, the mission that I got shot down, I was supposed to have gone, and I wasn't informed. So I stayed in the prison camp 15, 16 months.
Well, let's back up and continue on with your story before. I mean, there's a lot of story between that, but so you're into flight school now. Did you say down in Alabama?
Maxwell Field,
Okay.
Alabama. That was my pre-flight training.
Let me back up and ask another question as well. How was the transformation from civilian life into military life for you? How did that go?
At that time, this was in August of 41. There wasn't yet too much strict military. I felt very at ease, and on weekends, now this is before Pearl Harbor, I could go out the main gate at Patterson Field and hitchhike home to Akron. It would take me about the same time as if I drove myself, because being in uniform then added to it. So I felt more like it was just a job for me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All the military personnel were old-timers, and they were nice to us. And the only thing that changed when Pearl Harbor occurred, then promotions came real fast. And before I knew it, I was a buck sergeant, and I hadn't even been in a year.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
It was so bad, bad. We had enlisted men in recruit training who were corporals. We had so many ranks to fill in the squadron as it passed down. This one buddy of mine, he was in recruit training. He was a corporal. He says, "How do you like that?" And things went mighty fast then after Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
Then we started to get more military training.
Okay, so we'll move ahead now, and you're in flight training school. Talk a little bit about that.
The first, after Maxwell Field was more flight, pre-flight. My first training was in a PT-17. All those planes up above there are planes that I flew in training, except the B-17, of course. I went from Maxwell Field in Montgomery, Alabama, to Jackson, Mississippi, to a civilian primary flying school. And I was there 2 months, and then I went to Georgia. Where was the first place?
Go ahead.
Coyote, Texas, there.
What?
In Louisiana, Coyote, Texas.
No, my first training was in Georgia. I can't think of the name
That's
of the
fine.
field.
That's
right
fine.
now. And then from there, I went to Albany, Georgia, for my advanced training. And from advance, I graduated to Sebring, Florida, for training in B-17s. I stayed in training 2 months, and then went to Coyote, Texas, which is in the western end of Texas, and it was a godforsaken hole.
Well, how was that? Here's, I imagine, like many in your generation, you probably growing up didn't travel too far away from home.
Correct.
Here you're crisscrossing the country. What was?
All over the country. Yes, I really saw parts of the country. I never would have seen Europe if it hadn't been for war. At this Coyote, Texas, we got our crew. There were 10 members that we on the crew. The first one to come was a lieutenant. He was my co-pilot. Then we started to get the enlisted men, the gunners. And at Coyote, we all got familiar with our positions. And I felt very fortunate. I got a co-pilot, and he and I we clicked off immediately. In combat, they all stayed with, they stayed with me. We flew as a crew. A lot of times, men would go over, and they would be separated in different, fill in different crews. From our first mission to the end, when we got shot down, we all stayed together.
Is that right?
I'd say the crew lost one man. He was our right waist gunner. All the other 9 bailed out and spent the rest of the war occupying Germany.
Okay.
We were the first Allied troops to occupy Germany.
Well, let's back up once again. Did you leave then for Europe from Texas then, or once you got your crew, or where from Texas then?
From Texas, we stayed 2 months, and we went to Alexandria, Louisiana for more combat training. And from Louisiana, we flew to Kearney, Nebraska to pick up an airplane. And then is when we flew across the ocean. We went from
Hopscotching.
up to Maine, and Maine went to Canada. And then from Canada's when we flew across the Atlantic. I still feel proud of that.
You didn't stop in like Iceland? You just
One place,
Greenland or Iceland?
no, it slips me now, but it was a point when we landed. We looked out and there's the snow in our parking. That was way above our airplane. So we stayed, I think, one night, and the weather was clear enough that we could take off. And I still feel so lucky to fly an airplane across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I kept thinking of Lindbergh, but we didn't fly formation. We flew. I had our own navigator plot our course, and we landed in Wales. I can't think of the name of the city.
Now, is this the plane that you would end up flying in missions, or you were just delivering a new plane?
Just delivering a new plane.
Okay.
We thought that that would be our combat plane, but we had to fly our plane in England to a air base, and then it was turned over to them. They prepared it more for combat.
Okay.
Then my crew was shipped out to the 96th Bomb Group. That's the one we were assigned to, and the 413th Squadron. Now that was in the 3rd Division of the 8th Air Force.
Okay, so you're in the 8th Air Force, 96th Bomber Group,
Correct.
and 413th Bomber Squadron.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
We flew our first mission together. The co-pilot and I rode with another combat crew to get a little experience.
Sure.
I think usually that was done to all crews. And we had 9 missions before we got shot down. At that time, the setting was at 25 missions you flew, then you went home. Oh, we didn't get to go home. We landed in Germany, and after the German procedures, the officers were sent to Stalag Luft 1, which is in northern Germany, due north of Berlin, so that the Allies were just as far away from us as the Russians, and the Russians liberated us.
Wow.
And
well, let's go back and talk a little bit about those 9 missions. First off, what was? Can you go through it? I don't know if any 2
Yes.
missions were typical, but what a typical day would be like for you.
Let's see. I'll tell you about the first mission. Was one of the easiest. I didn't even know that we were getting ready to drop our bombs.
And this is the one you rode along?
No.
Oh, okay.
With the crew when we
Okay.
flew our first mission. We were only at 12,000 feet, and normally we bombed in Germany. It was around over 20,000, 21, 22. But this one it was at 12, and I let the co-pilot fly because I wanted to smoke a cigarette. And I was smoking a cigarette, and all of a sudden I hear bombs away. We hit targets in France, the V1, German V1 targets.
Which was the rockets, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And before I knew it, he tells me the bomb's away. So that was my first mission. And then the other missions were typical. We had not too much fighter.
Because this is still earlier in the war when Germany still had fighters in the air.
And this was in December of 41. When
42.
No, 41.
Because Pearl would have been December 41.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
this was December of 43.
43, okay.
When we were flying those missions. And I got shot down on February 10th of 44.
Go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, okay.
Well, talk a little bit about the inside of an airplane, because you weren't pressurized. I hear it was very
No.
cold up there. Can you just describe to the viewer what it was like in the
In the airplane, let's see, I don't have a picture, but the only heated part was the pilot's cockpit, that area. The other men had
heated suit, electric suit?
heated suits,
Uh-huh.
and the back of the ship the same way. They all had heated suits. If they
So the pilots didn't wear that. You're oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
say in the 17 they didn't wear heated suits. I had my regular uniform, and I had, when I got shot down, I had a good pair of shoes that I regretted wearing that day. You always blame something for getting shot down that day. This
blame those
happened,
shoes?
that happened. Like on my takeoff, we had been directed at takeoff to use, first we're set up at one runway, and then we had to change it. We were on our third runway before we actually took off. That the winds would keep changing. And I told the co-pilot when we got off of the ground that it was a lousy takeoff, and I never want to make another one like that.
I'll be darned.
And I surely didn't.
Well, I understand these takeoffs. The weather was a big factor with you're getting into formation. A lot of accidents happen in that with the English weather, and that could be hairy at times getting into formation because you flew so close. Is that?
Yeah, yes, it was. The co-pilot and I had systems worked out pretty good. We had a position on our intercom that just he and I could talk without the rest of the crew hearing what we were saying. So he would brief me on, we're getting too close to this group, we're getting too close there, pull up, pull down, drop down, because all you could see was airplanes and lights in that takeoff when you had, I forget how many groups forming. You take off and you form into your group on your leader. Our leader would have a flare, a certain color flare, so you could always hear, for example, if our color code was green. And so 90 chairback was our code name. Chairback leader, fire that gun, please. Fire that gun, everybody. Because most of the time we take off at dark. It was dark when we took off. And all you saw were airplanes and airplanes. You wonder how it was possible.
Wow.
You first formed into your squadron. Then from your squadron you had to form into your group. And then your group would get up into the division, and that's when you would head. I was on one mission where there were over 1,000 airplanes.
Oh, that must have been a sight.
And just I was going to say, what a sight it was. Up so high, and all in front of it, all you could see was airplanes, airplanes.
Wow.
See, that I'll never forget that sight. See, and by the time you would hit the channel, you were already in formation, and you hit the coast depending on what your target was. And the day we got shot down, the day I said I'll never forget, because the minute we hit the coast of Europe, we were attacked by fighter planes. We didn't get shot down by fighter planes, or if the fighter planes didn't cause we went over the target and the leader didn't drop bombs. That meant we had to circle and make a second tour. Well, over the first pass, we lost one engine. With 3 engines, you can keep up. The second pass,
It
we
was
lost
just
2.
mechanical failure, or was it the engine hit, or how did?
Flak. You know,
Oh, flak. Talk a little bit, if you could explain to the viewer what flak is and what that's like flying into that.
You wouldn't believe what it's like flying into that flak. You wonder, you see these guns exploding, the shells, and there are some that are real oily and black and they drip down. Others are explode and they're just like another gun exploding. And you look up at, well now this is my experience, I look up in front of me, 1, 2, where's that third one? You wonder if it's going to hit you. There's so much of it, you could almost figure you could walk on it, there's so much flak. And that day...
but flak is made of pieces of metal that is that
explode,
correct?
Yeah, they're anti-aircraft guns on the ground that are set at the height that we're flying at, and they explode.
And just throw metal into the...
Oh, and how they throw metal.
It must be a loud sound, it must be a...
We could, usually we hear it shattering into the airplane. You wonder why some of those didn't hit you. They're so close. But the 9 missions we just flew right through. Well, I should say 8. And I had, being the fact that we had to fly in the target area, that's where the most anti-aircraft was. And once you leave that, now then I had only 2 engines to fly with, and I dropped back. I couldn't keep up with the group. So that's when the enemy fighters hit us.
Oh, jeez.
And the co-pilot got one shell through his ankle. And the only thing that held his foot on was the boot that he had and a slight bit of his Achilles cord. And he had to bail out. We bailed out. It was 21 or 22,000 feet. And he bailed out at that with that. We'd given him a shot of what am I?
Morphine or?
Yeah, it was out of the first aid kit. The thing that I'm not. I don't use, Billie.
Penicillin?
For pain.
Oh,
He gave him a shot of that, but he still...
Morphine.
Yeah, morphine.
Yeah.
We had, and he bailed out and landed with that 1 foot. He spent all the time, and most of the time in Germany, in hospitals. And he was, when he got back to the States, he was told that the job done on his ankle was as good as could be done here. It was all filled up with bone. He stayed in most of the time in German hospitals.
Go ahead.
Tell him about how you bailed out and what happened to
Well,
you.
we'll get to that. I definitely want. This is a very important, obviously a very important story that we'll spend some time on. But I got a few more questions before we get to that point. The 8th Air Force was known to take incredible losses, more so than the other service branches. How was it? How did you? I guess in my mind, I see it a mission in 3 parts. You're preparing for the mission, you're on the mission, and then you're coming back from the mission. How would you prepare yourself, knowing that the odds were probably stacked against you? That obviously they caught up with you and you got shot down. That how did you fly in?
Seriously,
Prepare yourself for something like that.
Speaking for myself, I thought of it as a job. I was pilot. I had to keep that airplane in a position in the squadron. That meant protection for us. And most of my time was spent checking instruments, checking speed, and keeping the plane in a position to the next airplane. Because the closer we were in formation, the more protection we had. The enemy aircraft wouldn't come at us because there were too many guns on the enemy aircraft. Once you got out of position, look out, you had it. And we did. we lost the one waist gunner, and all the others, well, eventually they had to get out of their positions because they ran out of ammunition. And they saw the one engine burning pretty badly. So they knew, besides my warning I gave them, I have the pilot's position as a bell that sounds through the whole airplane. That's bailout bell. And when you hear that, you don't waste any time. You get the hell out of there.
But you had to hold the plane while everybody got out?
Correct.
And
The one experience I had, the controls were shot away. I'm flying with holding the control column, and there's pressure against it, and all of a sudden there's no pressure. Well, immediately then I go to the automatic pilot that held the airplane in a level position so that everybody could bail out. If I hadn't used that, the airplane would have gone.
okay, so it was sitting pretty steady when you
Yeah.
bailed? I was wondering about that, because in a B-17, I've climbed through those things. How do you manage to get out of your seat and get out the plane? Can you?
Yes, each position knew which door or which window they would go out, or the bomb bay. The bomb bay doors are open, and which one you wanted to get out. Now the navigator and the bombardier, they're up in the nose, so they go out a side door that's up front, and that's usually the door that the pilot and the co-pilot fly out of. The top turret gunner, he goes out of the same door, or he's close enough to the bomb bay. Well, the bomb bay doors are open, and they stay open. I'll tell you one experience I had. I looked around, was talking to the top turret gunner, and he was sitting down and kind of holding himself. When we got on the ground, I asked him if he had been hit. No, he said in turning the turret, he tangled his cords, and he bent down to untangle them, and when he got back up, he had no turret. It had been shot away. Yeah, that's exactly how all of us felt. It just, in the stomach, you wonder how you would survive something like that. Here he's holding there, no gun sights, no guns.
Did you feel, you were talking earlier that, once in tight formation you were pretty safe, but alone you weren't? Did you feel after you lost those engines and had fallen behind that was the end of it for you, or did?
You still imagine that maybe some miracle that your fighter support could come in. One P-38 fighter came to help us, and the next thing I know is the ball turret operator told me no more P-38. He got shot down. And we met him later on at the transient camp in Frankfurt, Germany. He thought he could fly home with us. And that day, our group lost only 3 airplanes, but the entire 8th Air Force lost a tremendous amount. It was Brunswick, Germany was the target, and that was there were quite a few fighter plane manufacturers in that area, and that's what we were after.
Okay. So thus it was very well protected then too, with anti-aircraft.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. It was one of those days where this time we all said the same thing. We couldn't get out and walk on that flak. It got to us, and we were on fire, so we had to get the heck out.
Wow.
The one engine.
Okay, so you bailed. What's it like now? You're out of the plane and you're floating down. Do you remember that coming down? And
very well. I got when I bailed out. I had a chest pack. I don't. Up in the cockpit, we don't keep that chest pack on. we usually set it someplace, so if we have to bail out, all we have to do is reach down or to one side, pick it up, and snap it on. And I had done that, and I had no oxygen bottle with me.
And you're
So
at 20-some thousand feet, right?
I knew I had to get down low, so I delayed my opening. And I know I must have been around 10,000 feet, 10 or 12,000 feet when I opened it up. And I was in a position that I just rolled right out perfect. No strain on any parts of my body. And I had everything strapped on right. I kept my parachute, my pack underneath my seat. And I didn't realize when I got down on the ground, here it is under the seat, and how many shells had gone through that airplane.
Oh,
That's what I thought. Did any go through the parachute? Well, it wasn't. I felt kind of weak then to realize that that could have happened, and I would have nothing above me to float me down. The thing that I did when I landed in a farm field, and I tried to get up to save my parachute, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, what do I want to save it for? I won't need it again, so I ran up and collapsed my chute, and I buried it in a ditch and covered it up. I didn't know it, but there had been a school bus coming down this road, one road, and the children got out. They didn't come anywhere near me, but when I moved from this field, they moved the same way. And the mayor of the little village that I was near, he came out and he kept asking me where my parachute was. And I didn't understand. I told him I didn't understand it. Well, the children told him that I had buried it in a ditch. So they took me over and made me uncover it and carry it. They wanted that chute to take to the families. It's all silk.
Oh, silk, okay, uh-huh.
And I kept dropping it, so the mayor told one of the men to come over and take it. They didn't want to get it too dirty. And he took me to his house in the village, and his wife hollered at him and told him to take me into the kitchen. And she sat me down near the stove, warmed me up, and got me coffee, and I couldn't drink it. And she got me their ersatz bread, and I didn't eat any, and I kept later on thinking, boy, how stupid, I should have stuck some in my jacket.
Yeah.
But they kept me there, and they brought, one fellow he understood that he was a fighter pilot that had been shot down and wasn't able to fly combat anymore. He wanted to know what kind of an airplane I was in. And he'd go 1, 2, or 4. And I let him know
engines?
4 engines. And it was, I stayed there, for an hour or so, and a bus came down the road. They picked up some of my other crew members. And when I got in it was a Ford bus, Ford V8, and I got a lot mad, but I kept my mouth shut. Here we are deep in Germany, and we get a V8 Ford bus. It took us to a Wehrmacht camp, and the guards turned us over to these men.
Oh, so the house you're saying, they weren't friendly. They were holding you until, okay.
Till the guards came. And it was then that we moved to different places in Germany until we got to their interrogation center.
They put you in a boxcar.
Not yet.
Not yet?
No, we were in boxcars from Brunswick, Germany. We went through Berlin to Frankfurt, Germany, where the interrogation center was.
Yeah, but were you initially shot out of the sky over France?
Brunswick.
Oh, Brunswick. Oh, okay.
Brunswick,
Okay.
Germany. We were on our way back.
Okay.
See, our first mission was over France.
Okay. Okay.
And this was our 9th mission.
Okay. Now, the waist gunner, did you lose him in the plane, or did he, on the way down, or how did he was killed?
He was killed in the air.
Okay.
And the other waist gunner tried to find his chute to put on him to throw him out. He said blood was coming out of his mouth. He knew he'd been hit pretty bad. In a situation like that, what is done is you usually parachute the injured man and throw him out, figuring that he'll get on the ground. Somebody will take him to a hospital right away. Well, they said he was real bad, and they couldn't find his chute, so they had to get out of the airplane.
Sure. Yeah.
And at interrogation, the man who interrogated me said he had found the airplane, and they found all of our men. They got all of our men. I was just getting ready to ask him how about the one that was killed, and I didn't. I didn't ask him anything at all. Let him have his information. They had information on me it was impossible to believe. They knew the different schools that I went to for flight training. They knew that they weren't sure that we had flown across, the crew, or that we took a boat. They knew I was in Presque Isle, Maine, and he kept asking me, what ship did you come across in? And I just kept shaking my head. They spoke wonderful English, and they knew every flying school I attended to. He told me when I went there, when I graduated.
Is that right?
Oh.
They knew about me, our baby.
So you were married. So you're married at this time. Oh my.
We've been married 66 years.
Oh, they had a tremendous intelligence system. My one brother was in the Signal Corps intelligence, and I told him about the situation there in interrogation center. He said, I wish I could tell you what we have in our intelligence, but I'm not allowed to. He says, you think they've got some? He says, you'd be surprised what we've got.
Is that right? Yeah.
He developed information on one 8th Air Force raid. From the information he got and located certain things, they sent the 8th Air Force on a raid.
Now, was the interrogation, did they rough you up at all, or was it pretty...
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
I was there 4 or 5 days, and I knew how many cracks were on each wall. I knew how many cracks were in the floor. I counted them. Say, you had, in the morning you got a cup of coffee and 2 pieces of bread. And at lunch you usually had a sandwich and coffee, and the same thing at night. And one time, one of the bringing the food, he gave me a sandwich, and in German I told him another one, noch eine. And he didn't move. He just reached down and gave me. And I found, boy, that's the greatest thing that happened to me, that I pulled something like that. And we stayed there, 5 days, I think. And then we were moved into a barracks, getting ready for transportation to Stalag Luft 1.
Let me ask you, and tell me if I'm stepping over the line here, but being Jewish, did you worry about that at all? The fact that...
I thought of it one time, and I saw no difference in the way I was being treated, and there were several other Jewish boys with
Because
me.
obviously they're aware that you were Jewish if they knew everything about you. Yeah.
Yeah, I had it on my dog tag.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't until January of 45. We were in the camp, and this one morning, Paul knocked at the door, and he had a slip of paper with names on it. Another boy and I were the only two Jewish boys in this room. We were to be ready, be packed, be ready to move out. We had to go to Berlin. It was direct Hitler's order that all Jewish boys were to be moved out. Our commanding officer, Allied commanding officer, a man by the name of Zemke, he made a deal with the commander of the German commander that these boys would not be moved out. They'd be moved into a separate barracks. Number one, he threatened him. He said, I have close to 3,000 men with no guns. He says, you may have less than 1,000 men with guns. He says, I'll lose a lot of my men, but you'll lose your command. And he says, and you know that wouldn't be good for you. This is the story that I later on found out it was true. That instead of moving us out, we were moved into one barracks, and we stayed there until the Russians liberated us.
Now, were you aware at all of the atrocities that were being...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We had radios hidden in the different rooms, so that we knew the news more than the Germans did.
How did you manage to get radios into the camp?
These guys that were shot down carried different parts, and then there were guys that traded with the Germans. Cigarettes was the common factor, and you could get almost anything with cigarettes. So in the movie Stalag 17, I think it was, it showed how they traded with the Germans on getting different parts. They got cameras, and they got escape maps. There were Germans that wanted the cigarettes badly, and that's how we got some of our food. In fact, the PX we had, when we got our Red Cross parcels, that was food parcels.
Mm-hmm. And they would get in. They weren't held back by the Germans.
No, what was done, the Germans would open them and puncture food cans so that we couldn't save them up for escape.
They had to eat them right away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they took out the pepper packages because we would take the pepper packages, open them up, and spread them down through the floor underneath the floor where the dogs went back and forth.
Okay.
And pretty soon all the dogs were doing was sneezing, so they took our pepper away from us. And one other thing I forget that was taken out of those Red Cross parcels. But while there was transportation, we got a Red Cross parcel every week, each man. And boy, we had cigarettes. Oh man, I would take mine. We usually got 5 packages of American cigarettes. I could trade my 1 pack for 5 packs of French cigarettes, and they were as strong as the dickens, but I still wanted a cigarette, so I traded for French cigarettes. And before we got liberated, I had just gotten to the point where when I woke up in the morning, I could light up a French cigarette. They were so darn strong.
Wow.
See?
Let's talk a little bit about life in the camp. You said you got separated, the enlisted men went off to a different camp and the officers went to...
Correct. I had somewhere, Stalag Luft 1. It was due north of Berlin. Oh, I brought it up. I thought I did. Yeah.
And talk about digging
The what?
the tunnels.
That's where it shows
Okay.
where the camp is.
Okay.
And several of the rooms in our barracks dug tunnels. All of us did. It
Yes.
gave us something to do. And it's amazing what was thought of for air bellows, to pass air. When you dug so far, you had to have air. You had to have support. So most of us would take the bed slats and use those to support the walls of the tunnel. And we would steal barbed wire and string through our bed so we'd have some support for our mattresses. And our room was digging a tunnel, and somebody came, hollered that the guards were coming. Well, we found out there was right across the room, they were digging a tunnel. Farther on down the barracks, they were digging a tunnel. We didn't know about the third one. But the guards caught it. They didn't catch anybody because the guards had gone into the room across the hall from us. And when the guys were coming up out of the tunnel to get into their room, we were able to let them walk over to where our tunnel was and get out in our room. And we covered up the floor again. What we had done is, like in the movie, they used the stove.
Yeah.
And moved the stove out of the way, and that's what we did. We were able to put the stove back in, so none of us got caught.
Tell them how you got rid of the dirt.
Oh, the dirt, the guys went out and started a garden. We would use our pajamas, pants, or any old pants, to put the dirt down in, and we had to tied near our ankles. We'd walk into the garden and shake the dirt out as we walked along so that it mixed in with the fresh dirt from the garden.
So, so anybody watching this tape, to get a good idea of how you guys did it, could see the movie like The Great Escape. Well,
Yeah.
it was very similar to.
Very similar.
Okay.
We heard about the Great Escape through our radios, but no, I think the farthest anybody got from our camp was Berlin, and they got caught.
Oh, so you eventually did tunnel out of the camp?
Some few fellows did. Others, let's see, the one group, I don't know how many, I forget now how many there were, got into the trash wagon. So they could get out of the gate, and then when they got into the area, they got out of the wagon. And you just can't figure all the things that these guys would devise. How they're going to screw the Germans. It was quite an experience, honestly.
How were conditions in the camp? As far, I mean, like how many people would be in your barrack in a barrack or?
They're in our room.
Or room.
They had we had 20, 60, 10. Let's say we had 20 men to a group, and we had 3 groups, so there were 60-some men. There were, at first there were double beds. Then it got crowded and there were triple beds. So after a while it became, how can I put it, you had the same people day in, day out. You knew everything they had talked about and talked over again. So you had to adjust yourself. And the majority of them survived.
What were you treated pretty well by the Germans, and how was the food and such like?
The food at one period in 45, for 2 months, we practically starved. because the transportation was so shot up, the Germans couldn't get food. According to the Geneva Convention, the prisoner of wars were to be given the same quantity and quality of food that the frontline troops had. Well, the Germans couldn't get food into the camp, and so there for a while, one potato and 2 slices of bread a day, and you learned. It was truly an experience.
Did you ever lay in bed in your bunk at night and crave a milkshake or a hamburger, or was there anything that you constantly thought about that?
Day in and day out, fellows would come around with their notebooks. Where do you live? What's the best restaurant in your town? Yeah, we had so many of those during the starvation period. But you learn. Guys took those 2 slices of bread, and we could always sharpen our knives, and they had them real sharp to see how many slices you can get out of those 2 slices.
Oh, jeez.
And you could almost hold them up and look through like tissue paper. But we managed. There was always something going on.
What would a normal day? How would you pass a time of day away? I mean,
Reading, athletics. We had when the starvation period, you did a lot of walking. You could walk around the compounds, and naturally, all you were talking about was food. You found things. We had a tremendous library.
really?
And the International Red Cross furnished us with that. We played, baseball, played football. We had boxing matches.
Really? Yeah.
In fact, at our camp, the Allied commanding officer, a fighter pilot by the name of Zemke, who was so respected, he boxed with one of the men who was a boxer in civil life. And we had dramatic plays, and we had an auditorium. We had classes. I went to one, this fellow was a lawyer, and if he'd get enough money, he'd hold a class on law, remembering what he went through when he went to college. You did everything you could to occupy your time.
Yeah. How was your general state of mind? I mean, did you...
I'm trying to remember. For the first 6-7 months, you figured you'd get out early, that the war would be over. I wish I had the calendar. I had a calendar that we all marked down which day we were going to get out. And mine was early. Mine was August of 43. And there were some that had us way into December of 45. And that's when we'd be liberated. We managed.
You kept a diary, Dad, on cigarette packs.
Oh, for paper, I opened up a pack of cigarettes and took the cover. So there was writing paper on the inside. And I did keep a diary, didn't I?
Mm-hmm. We still have part of it.
You tried everything.
Well, now, along with the Red Cross packages, were you able to get communications from home? And I actually want to get your viewpoint on that too. With him being in the camp in your home, you had a daughter at this point,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Our baby was 2 weeks old when he left.
Oh,
Yeah,
I mean,
we had a picture. I thought we had it.
do you remember the day you got word that he had been shot down?
Oh, yes.
And at that point, did you know he was a?
In those days, the Western Union delivered the messages, whereas now they go to the home.
Mm-hmm.
And they delivered to Western Union that he had been reported missing in action.
Oh, jeez.
And when they handed it to me, I knew what it was, and I fainted. And
Oh, my.
and our baby was 2 weeks old. No, she was 2 months, but he saw her. He came home for a day and saw her when she was 2 weeks. And he left on our anniversary to go overseas. We'd been married a year when he left.
That had to be tough. I can't imagine what...
And she was 2 when he came home.
How long before... You got that initial telegram that he was missing in action. How long before you realized that
7 months.
7
I
months of
waited.
uncertainty.
Nothing at all. So, anyway, my father was real strict with me because he was a World War I veteran. And he said so many of the men's wives cheated on their husbands, and he was real strict with me, and he'd take me to the movies and set me down. You better be there when I come back. So they paged me. I was at the movies, and they paged me to come to the lobby. And I went to the lobby, and my dad was sitting there waving the telegram and had a big smile on his face. And then I knew he was all right. And it said he was a POW then. And then I waited after that telegram. I waited about 3 more months, and then I got like a penny postcard. And the only thing, they had it censored so bad that all I could see was my dearest wife and baby and his name.
Huh.
They really censored them.
Yeah.
And then I got one of those a month. And occasionally they'd let him tell me something in the card. And then the war ended in May of 44.
45.
45. And so he didn't get home until August. And I thought he wasn't coming home. He came home on an LSD boat.
LSD.
And it took him a long time to get home. I thought he was deserting me. And so it was with a new baby and everything, you know, in the war, it was really hard.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And of course, in those days, everything was, you had to have not food stamps, rationing. And we had a neighbor that they were older couples, and they used to give me their coupons to get our little girls shoes because, you know, children's feet grow. And but myself, I couldn't, you know, the adults. It was hard to go out and buy shoes, and we had to have stamps to get sugar. And so then when I wanted cigarettes, I got a Dayton to the PX. I could go up there as a POW and get cigarettes and bring them. And bring him home, and oh my gosh, I had more friends in the world because I brought back cigarettes. But, and the only thing you can do is just pray and hope that he comes home. But he never did receive but maybe one package I sent him. I went to the Red Cross and gave them money for cigarettes and to send him, and clothing, and he never did receive anything.
Is that right?
To the last month, my mother and I made fudge, and we put it in a large pan. We didn't cut it because we thought it would keep better, you know, just in one. And he said they were real hungry, and he said he divided it with everybody in his compound.
Well, we shared it.
And when they came home from the service, I got more thank you notes thanking me for that little piece of candy. And
usually what we find, most of the fellows, when they would get a food package or cigarette package, they'd share it. They wouldn't keep all of it. They'd share it all
Is that
in
right?
the room. So cigarettes, that was so important to us.
the night he came home, from the service. My little girl was asleep. I had her all dressed. We knew he was coming home. And I always kept a picture beside her crib. And I'd say a little prayer for Daddy. And she'd kiss his picture goodnight. And so naturally, the first thing he wanted to see the baby.
Sure.
And he goes in, and Linda was asleep. And all at once she woke up and she sees her daddy, and she reached for him and she went, Daddy. And Manny couldn't understand how she knew that.
Wow. Oh, boy, that must have been something.
It was an experience. I didn't think so much about it until after I could sit down and think things over, what had happened to me.
Yes.
Coming back home.
Was it tough, particularly more so that you had married and had a baby girl at home? Was it tough being in the camp in a way?
No, because there were so many guys in the same position.
Okay.
And I know one group of us, we spared notes when we got a letter from home. We let all of them know that we got a letter and read it out loud.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
It
Mr. Magilavy.
it really changes things.
So now you guys had radio, so you knew you were keeping up on things. Could you tell the war was coming towards the end, or
The radios were hidden. See, we didn't have them in the rooms. Maybe one room in a barracks would have a radio, and it was secret. They didn't. We knew more about what was going on than I did when I was back here.
is that right?
I knew exactly what was happening, more so than the Germans. And there was one guard I'll never forget. See, we had a wall on the map, and one fellow was appointed to keep it up to date. And this one guard would always come into our room, and he's speaking German. He would ask this one fellow, where's this and where's that? What's happening? He knew more about it from our radio than he did from his newspapers and radio. The thing that got the German guards upset, and all you had to do was say Ruski kommt. The Russians come.
Oh, right, yeah.
They want no part of it.
Yeah. So you knew that more than likely the Russians were going to get to you before the Americans or the British?
They were so close that we figured the way they were going, the way the Russians were going, they would be there. What the Russians did in some camps, as soon as they released the prisoner of war camp, they had them march to Odessa
Oh, jeez.
on the Black Sea. And we had a Allied commanding officer. I still admire the guy. He's passed away now. But he worked with the Germans to see that nothing happened to us. He finally got through when the Russians liberated us and wanted us to get packed to move. He got in touch with the nearest Allied troops to us, which was in the northern part of Germany. And he had it quashed that we had to march to Odessa. I think I told you he was the one who straightened it out for the Jewish boys.
Mm-hmm. So the day you were liberated, did the Germans just flee, or how did that all transpire?
The night before the Russians got there, some of the Germans climbed on the fence, wanting to come in and act as ex-prisoners. Said they had enough clothes that they could be civilians, but they all left the day before, and the night before there were no guards the next morning. That's how we knew we were being liberated.
What was it like then when the Russians got to the camp, and how'd that all go down? And
The Russians knew everything that we had given them. this, in my case, this one Russian driver got hold of me and dragged me over to his truck, and it was a Dodge truck, and he went up and pointed to it and patted it. And he says, American. And then he took us around to the back, and he had oranges and something else he gave us. He says, Amerikansky, Amerikansky, and just kept giving us because he knew we didn't have any food.
Oh, that must have been
we were in Pomerania, the camp was, which is dairy country. Now the Russians rounded up herds of cows, brought them into camp and told us to milk them, kill them, eat them. And boy, there were enough butchers in the camp, they knew what to do. But that was the first fresh meat that it was 18 months.
Wow.
And we really ate. I thought these Russians are GIs, the way they were. The same guy, he showed me on his truck all the bullet holes that he had patched. And he kept patting it, Amerikansky, Amerikansky, that it was an American truck. They knew that we had helped them.
So they were fairly friendly then. Okay.
Oh yes, yes indeed.
And then once liberated, where did you go from there then?
We were flown to France.
Oh.
By B-17s. See, then we had to wait for transportation home. Well, Eisenhower did come and talk to us one day. Practically the whole camp was in his field. And he said that as much as he wanted to, he couldn't take all the ships and make them for transportation home because there was still a war to be fought. So after, I forget how long I was there.
What was your date of liberation? Do you remember? Or what month?
May.
May of 45, so.
Yes.
Okay.
And I didn't get home until July, wasn't it?
August.
August?
Right before my birthday, he got home.
I made it, huh?
But I didn't think I thought he deserted me.
No, our navigator, let's see, he's the second from right.
Okay.
He, the day after the Russians liberated us, he took off, he got to Paris, and he got someplace where he got a ride home to the States. And before I got back home, he had a job with Pan American, flying as navigator, the Atlantic. And later on it was asked that we all stay in camp, not to go take off by ourselves. We'd be safer and we'd have food. That settled me. I said, I'll wait. But
how were you physically at this point? I mean, had lost a lot of weight? I mean, were you?
I lost a lot of weight. I didn't realize what poor physical condition I was because I could still walk where I wanted to walk. I didn't run. I didn't exercise. Didn't play any athletics. And I don't think I went to the States or to the hospital until I got back to the States.
In Dayton. You were in the hospital in Dayton.
Well, did they offer anything in the way of physical or counseling or anything to
At that time, no, because they were too busy getting everybody straightened out, finding out where we were to go and all that. Later on, then there was recommendations that we take exercise because of our conditions. See, they didn't, it wasn't known how what kind of condition most of us were in.
Yeah.
Some of our camps were like ours. We had fairly decent food for the position that we were in. Others were starved to death. Others marched. Like that camp which they made the Great Escape, that whole camp was marched. And those guys had it horrible. See, there are some horror stories that are worse than the Japanese.
Really? Wow.
And it just wasn't put out. It was quite an experience, honestly, but I wouldn't want to go through it again.
Yeah, yeah.
I learned an awful lot from it. You had an awful lot of time to spend by yourself, and if you, I don't know how many different buddies I had all that time, but I kept changing because we'd be with this one person, and you know their whole life in a short period of time. What are you going to talk about? You find another one and you go through with this fellow. And like I say, it was quite an experience.
So you, after this time in the camp, then you took a ship across back home?
Yes.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about this. Here's a Midwest boy. What was that like? I heard these ocean crossings were something else. And did you get your sea legs, or how did that?
No, I came back on an LSD. That's a landing ship tanks.
Right, which is a flat bottom ship.
Flat bottom. So
yeah.
We went this way and we went that way. The accommodations for the officers were terrific. The bed, oh man, the first time I slept through the night and through the day in the bed. The food, you could get food anytime you wanted. It's only, again, in the middle of the ocean.
Tell about the boy that died, that ate so much.
Oh, that was in the prison camp we had.
Oh, I thought it was on the boat.
No. He, well, as soon as we got food, naturally some of the guys overdone it. And he stuffed himself. And we had a hospital there, but still at the time we didn't have enough equipment. And the doctor did his best, but he couldn't save it. And then it was, well, orders were given or let out to everybody. Be careful what you eat and how much you eat. Here we are, we had very little food, then all of a sudden we're piled up with all kinds of
right,
food.
For sure.
And, oh, what a day that was. I think, what did I have? I took a can of corned beef and chopped it up and fried it. And that day I ate the whole can. And it never tasted so good.
Mm.
Oh, it's quite an experience.
Tape, I think you were on your way home. You were on that LST coming home. Where did you guys land in the States?
In New Jersey.
New Jersey?
I'm trying to think of the city.
Did you go? You went past the Statue of Liberty, and
we sure did. I'll tell you, the few prisoners of war that were on that boat, we stood and just, I didn't salute. I had my hand over my heart. I don't know if I cried or what, but I just stood there and watched it because it was such a dream that really came true. You could, it was so believable. I'd wake up at night sometime and you were staring or I was staring at the Statue of Liberty. Another time I was flying over it.
This is when you were in a prisoner?
The prison camp,
Oh,
yeah.
be darned.
There were times I had nightmares, and they continued on until I got home and was treated for them. Some I remember waking up one night and I was hollering, "Run, run, run!" And the guy that slept above me told me what I was doing. I was running from a German that was shooting at me. And I tried to eliminate most of my nightmares. At first, more so when I got home than when I was in the prison camp.
How would you do that? How would you eliminate them?
That's a good question. You just had to make up your mind, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm not dead, nobody's shooting at me, settle down. And in these meetings I go to, that's what was recommended too, to just think you're alive, you're not wounded, you're not dead, that's over with, forget about it. Because this group that I'm in, originally there were 12 of us, 2 of them have passed away. But by listening to their stories, we realize, well, I went through the same thing as this guy's going through now, or he's going through what I had. And it has helped tremendously.
So these nightmares still persist to this day, or
no. Every once in a while, I'll have one. The worst one was bailing out with, I couldn't get my parachute open. I woke up before I hit the ground. No.
How long after the war do you think you kind of overtook them, or that you finally suppressed them enough, or was it?
It was quite a while.
Yeah.
My worst one, and I still have it, the gal is helping me, was when this fellow knocked on the door and we opened it in the barracks. And he had a piece of paper in his hand, and they named the two of us Jews to be packed and be ready to move out the next morning. And both of us knew right away what it was. And we went to the barracks commander and asked him to steer us to the escape committee. Because any escapes that were tried out of the prison camps, you had to work through the escape committee. And he told us then that everything had been settled and not to worry about it. Don't try anything foolish. And he was right.
Oh, I hung up the phone.
Oh, okay. That still bugs me, that I see him with that piece of paper in his hand and reading off those 2 names.
Did you ever learn where, I mean, you were lucky that your commander kept you back. Did you ever learn what happened to those that had to be shipped off, or what?
None of them did.
I mean, from other camps that they were collecting, have you ever heard what?
Several rooms in our camp, as well as other camps, when the German guards came in, they lined up the men in the room and asked the Jewish boys to step forward. Well, everybody stepped forward. And in the other camps, it worked the same way. They knew that they would be going out. That's one of the thing that still bothers me. I stop and think, where in the hell would I have been if they'd, his name is Zemke, He was a P-51 pilot. What a tremendous character.
So in the camp you kept a military chain of order as well?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All the way through. Each barracks had a commander, and then there was a camp commander. They made it, well, we wound up, I hear stories between 8,000 and 9,000 prisoners of war in this one camp.
Wow, oh jeez.
Oh, there are more men shot down. I think all told, the 8th Air Force lost 16,000 planes. And that's 10 men to a plane.
Hmm.
And, when we used to meet infantry guys, they talk how clean we had it because we'd go in a uniform and come back in a uniform. But,
well, wasn't it said that with the flyers that the Lufthansa Luft camps, they had kind of a mutual respect for you and took a little bit better care of you than...
That's right. See, the Luftwaffe took care of the 8th Air Force and British pilots, and even Polish pilots. They were in a separate part of our camp, but they weren't taken and shot. They were treated almost like we were. One thing about our camp is that we had a flak school, an aircraft school across the field from us, and it was run by women, and they trained women. So one time, a bunch of us got to the fence and were hollering at the women until the German officers came over and had the guards move us away. We were whistling at the women, see, and sometimes the farm workers were girls, and they'd come and take care of the fields near our camp until the guys got over there and whistled, and you know how the guys act. That's what happened. And then you always had, like when the Polish women came, fellas that could speak Polish. So boy, they had some stories to tell us. There were times when it was enjoyable. We compared what our day-to-day livelihood and livings were as compared to that moment.
Yeah.
But the fact that we lived through it, that is something.
Was there any time in there where you almost gave up hope that you would live through it? I mean, or was it ever get that bad for you? Or?
Never.
Oh,
never.
okay, okay.
All of us had the attitude that we're only here temporarily. We knew that we figured it would be the Allies that got to us first, and they almost did. We were up north on the Baltic,
Mm-hmm.
and the Russians, and boy, I'll tell you, those guys, they were like they were on a racetrack.
Yeah.
And they came in, and it, see, the first troops that liberated us were their, not their regular infantry, they were the troops that really did the rough, dirty work. And they're the ones who wanted us to pack and march. And then when their orders were changed, they were the finest guys.
Is that right? Huh?
We met, in my room, or no, he was next to me, was a friend of mine who taught himself to speak Russian while he was in a prison camp. And he became one of the main interpreters. Well, he got hold of some of the Russian soldiers who were Jewish. Now they brought in white bread they brought in cooked chicken and sat down and had a Friday night meal with us.
Hmm.
Now, they also brought vodka. Well, we couldn't speak Russian, they couldn't speak English. Enough cups of vodka, they spoke English and we spoke Russian. We understood each other. And we really had an evening. First we ate, and then they start telling us their experiences in the war. And all they wanted to do was get home, get out of the army.
Just like you.
Just like we did.
Yeah.
See? And that was one really enjoyable night with those guys. They told us how many battles they had been in and where they started in Russia. And here we were. In civilian life, I never would have been able to meet people like that.
Right,
So
right.
find out that, heck, they're human like we are.
Yeah.
They want to get home.
Yeah.
Some of them were married. They hadn't seen their children. Others wanted to get married. But they followed orders like we did.
Now, how did you feel about the Germans? Did you any hatred or animosity towards them at all, or what were your thoughts? I guess then and now, really.
We didn't have direct contact with others, and mostly the night guards. Those who could speak English would come to the window, and I know one that I talked to. He said his sister and her family lives in Brooklyn. Which prison camp is she in? He figured that all the Germans would be put in prison camps. And the ones who could speak English were usually taken care of by the guys who did all the trading. It was more accepted that they knew what to do. Very few of them could speak fluent German. But some of the stories they used to tell us, I wish I could remember.
It seemed like from the movies and the documentaries I've seen that the barracks were pretty poorly built. I mean, particularly up north where it was colder weather. What were the winters like? The heat of the summer, or just living in according to the weather conditions up there? What?
The winter that we were in, let's see, 44.
Which was one of the worst in European history. Yeah.
And man alive, we took everything that we could to cover us up, because we had used most of our bed slats for the tunnels, so we couldn't use them for firewood. Well, we'd take off our clothes and use them for blankets so that we didn't wear the same thing. Well, I did anyway, and that kept me more warm. I was issued, I don't know how I wound up with 2 blankets. We were issued 1 blanket, and boy, I covered myself up. Ooh-wee. There was only one night that I can remember. It was so cold I couldn't sleep. And we didn't want to keep what we did, for cooking, we used the stoves that we were supposed to use for heat. And we rebuilt them in each room to make it for a stove. Because in our compound, we had to do our own cooking.
Oh, really? Okay.
There was the second compound I went into. They had a communal kitchen, and in this communal kitchen, what was done is it was decided which items out of your Red Cross parcel would go to the kitchen, so they had enough to feed everybody. And then it caught fire. So we were back to where we were doing our own cooking again. And it's surprised what these guys can do. We had some cooks that it was tremendous what they did with it.
Huh.
We made cakes, and we'd take what we had, each fella, like our room, we'd have combines. We had, what I think, some of them had 7, we had 6. And we decided which items go into the combine. And for 1 week, you had to do the cooking. And we had KPs. The rooms were kept clean. And each guy, it's amazing what they come up with making out of these items. We didn't starve, but still we were hungry.
Yeah. What about clothing? You know, you had the outfit you landed in. You particularly talk about those shoes. Did those shoes last you through the time, or were you issued other POW clothing, or how did that work?
I know one time I was issued GI pants and GI shirts, and I think I got shoes one time. Well, in the summertime, naturally we'd go barefooted to save our shoes. And I'm trying to remember now. I think it was only this one time. I know one time I got some GI pants. I had to tear them apart and resew them so they'd fit me. But at least I had a new pair of pants. And they were GI. The International Red Cross would furnish us with. The International Red Cross brought us like football equipment, baseball equipment, soccer equipment, and we had fields big enough. We had some darn good baseball games, but the only thing is, every once in a while the guys would knock them out over the fence, so we'd lose a ball. Oh.
Well, getting back then to you came in ashore in New Jersey. You'd mentioned earlier that you'd spent some time in the hospital. What were you in there for?
I came to Patterson Field, and my brother got me a flight down to Ashland, wasn't it, Dave?
No, you went into Indiana.
Well, yeah. That's where he picked me up.
Yes, and then he brought you to Ashland, where I lived. My home was in Kentucky.
Okay.
I lived in Ashland, Kentucky.
Okay.
And his brother brought him
My
from
brother
Indiana.
Was stationed at Patterson Field again, and his CO was flying from Chicago into Patterson. So he asked him to pick me up in Seymour, Indiana. And man, I had a hard time getting anybody to drive me over from the base to the field. I think finally I wound up, I paid $20 for a GI to drive me. Gasoline.
Huh.
Oh, see, that was when?
You went to Dayton to the hospital because of ulcers. You had
stomach trouble, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Stomach problems.
And I went there and I couldn't eat. The only thing, I'd go down every so often and get a milkshake. But they'd bring me food and I couldn't eat anything. And
just couldn't hold it down, or just weren't hungry, or
I couldn't get it down. And I couldn't get anything into my stomach, and they couldn't find anything that they could do because they had no records. I came to Akron, and there was a VA clinic, or a doctor who took care of VA, And I went to him, and the same thing. He says, "Where's your records?" And boy, I nearly blew up. I told him, he was a major, and I said, "Major, did you read my report, or my schedule there?" He said, "Yeah." I says, "How in the hell do you expect the ex-POW to have records?" I says, "I can't wire Germany to get them." And he said there was nothing he was prepared to do for me. And how long was it? I couldn't eat.
Oh, for a long time. Nothing but liquids.
Were you experiencing these ulcers and such back at the camp, or
No,
did this all start?
no, until I got out. And there were a lot of us that were the same way. And we didn't realize it until I got into these ex-POW groups, and we started talking and realized you're going through the same thing I'm going through. And how long was it before we got with Linda?
Oh, that was 5 years ago with Linda, but you've been going to VAs for 25 years.
But once you got back to the States, there was no such counseling and such to transition you from.
At that time, no.
No. But
See, now there is.
excellent care. VA gives him excellent care. I put my life at VA in Cleveland.
The doctor, this one particular doctor, saved my life. I had prostate trouble, and he was supposed to operate. And he went in and closed me up. He says, "I don't like the looks of this blood." And it was how many months? Over almost 2 months before he found out that I had a blood factor condition, that if I was operated on, I couldn't stop bleeding. And that's what he saw in that first examination. He said, if I had gone ahead, he says, I would have killed you. What's required now when I have any kind of surgery, they prepare...
he has blood transfusions before.
Yeah, they know how serious it is, so they know how many pints to give me.
Right.
And they feed me before and during surgery. And I stop and think, supposing I had been shot, nobody would know what to do.
Oh my, wow.
So I swear by the VA.
They've given him excellent care. Is that on? Oh, I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk now about your reunion when you got back. What that was like. We'll get both perspectives here on.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, they. See, that's when they flew me in from. What's the name of that place in Indiana?
Seymour.
Seymour. Well, my brother's commanding officer flew to that air base there, and I got, it was a twin-engine plane. He let me sit up front, and I says, I can't control it because it's been 18 months. So he let me you can follow through. You put your hands on the controls and your feet on the rudder pedals, and you don't use pressure. You just follow what the operator's doing. And I enjoyed it, and we talked about my last mission, what happened. And he flew me into Patterson Field where my brother picked me up. And he gave me, fortunately we both wore about the same size uniform. And I sure needed one because I wore this uniform from England through the States to his place. I couldn't get anything done. uh, and she took me, or he took me to her house, or her mother's house.
I lived with my parents while he was gone.
And honestly, I was in a little daze because I couldn't coordinate or realize how fast things were changing.
Wow.
And I had to stop until she came down the stairs and I threw my arms around her.
All the neighbors were out. I was so embarrassed. He started hugging and kissing me, and I said, "People are watching." He said, "I don't give a damn."
But you knew he was coming.
Oh yeah, he
okay.
called me. He
Okay.
called me from New York the night he came in from overseas, and I knew he was coming home. So all the neighbors were out, welcoming him home.
Now, you guys met while you were in the service, or how?
I worked at Wright Field in Dayton,
Oh, okay.
and he was stationed
Okay.
at Patterson.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that's how we met.
Okay.
A blind date.
Yeah. How long did you court before you remember?
About a year.
Yeah.
It was that long, wasn't it? I got transferred out, I moved around. Well, that's when I went to flying school.
And were you able to follow with, or did you stay
No,
behind?
I went to visit, but I didn't
Yeah,
go
okay.
there to live. It was poor housing. And,
Yeah. Right.
and then I became pregnant, and I wanted to settle down.
Sure.
In one of the cities we were in, the hotels rented you a room one night. Didn't matter who it was. One night is all they allowed.
Huh.
I think it was Alexandria, Louisiana.
But they rented you anything to servicemen, and they were
Oh,
rat
boy.
infested, cockroaches, and
Huh.
just anything, to get rent. And so anyway, I went home to have my baby.
Yeah. Well, now well, let's talk about that part of the reunion. Going into her room and seeing your daughter. The experience,
Well,
and then she woke up. From your perspective, tell us about that.
When my mother-in-law wired me that the baby was born.
No, honey, when you came home
Yeah.
from overseas.
Oh, we can talk about that too. The whole experience, but.
The experience was that I had the navigator check. I think we were in Louisiana, and I had him give me coordinates, flight path to West Virginia. And they knew. I told them, you guys, this next day wear your Class A uniforms.
They weren't going to let him come home.
I was going to fly to West Virginia because we'd been in an area where we flew 3 hours in a 60-mile radius. We couldn't go any farther in training. So that morning they came down dressed up, and I had my Class A uniform on. And what do you know, my squadron CO, group CO, comes down and he says, "I'm giving you a check ride today." Well, I didn't realize what must have happened is one of the crew told him they didn't want me to get into trouble and come down
He
and
wouldn't
give
have
out
gone
check ride.
overseas. He'd been in the brig.
But I didn't see the baby again until I flew into Patterson Field, and my brother's girlfriend drove me down down to Ashland, and it took me a while to realize this is mine, how big she is. And was her hair color different?
She was born with black hair, and her baby hair came out, and it came red, sort of a red. Oh my God, where does this red come? Oh God, sorry. And anyway, her hair got blonde, and it was real curly. He asked me not to have her hair cut because she had beautiful hair when she was born. Way down here, a lot of it curly. He says, don't cut her hair till I get home.
And then what was it like that night when you came home and went up to her room and then...
She called him Daddy.
Yeah,
You
she
asked
did.
why. How did she know I was her father?
Then I saw the picture.
She used to kiss his picture goodnight, and I'd say a little prayer for Daddy to come home safe. And then when he got civilian clothes, she wouldn't go to him. She'd say, "That is my daddy," because she hadn't seen him but in uniform. Had to go and put on his uniform before she'd go to him.
I wasn't the only one that had either a real young child or the child was born while they were there.
Right.
The guys. And, well, we had plenty of time to think about what we'd like to happen when we would first get home. And there are some stories the other way.
Dear John letters.
Yeah, right.
Boy, it makes you grow up.
Yeah. And how much, once you were back in the States, how much longer were you in before you were finally then discharged?
I was discharged in January
46.
of 46. See, I still had time built up for leave, so I was out and I was awaiting discharge.
You were to go to Florida for R&R.
Yeah, I didn't get there. I wanted to stay in as an enlisted pilot, but there were no such things in the Air Corps anymore. Then it already became the Air Corps. And some buddies of mine, well, this one fellow I'll tell you about later, but they stayed in the Air Corps, and they were trained to fly B-29s. We all flew B-17.
For the Pacific?
And they didn't like that, because some of them had flown their 13 or flown their missions, and they said that's enough.
Right, sure.
So they got discharged, stayed out. This one fellow, who was a classmate of mine, he found me after 63 years.
Wow.
He traced me down. We flew across the Atlantic together. He was in one plane and I was in another the same day, but we didn't get into the same group in England. He completed 32 missions, and he says it was luck. He says, seriously.
Particularly with the odds, once again, with the odds of the loss of men and planes that the 8th took. I mean, that was incredible.
He said 2 times this happened, that he came down, and you're usually assigned a position where your airplane goes, and that's the first time you find out about it is at this meeting where they show you the target, show you where your plane, where you fly, and his usual position, another plane number was there. That guy didn't come back. He says it happened twice that way. So his expression is, don't tell me it isn't luck. He says that's how he made it, 32 missions. And he flew mostly with his same crew. And I'm sitting here one day and I answer the telephone, and this fellow asks me if you're sitting down. He says, yeah. And when he told me who it was 63 years since I had seen him. He says, I've been trying and trying. And he found out through, my daughter had signed us up when we were in New Orleans.
No, honey, in Washington.
Oh, yeah.
At the War Memorial.
And his buddy found me.
He saw Debbie's name up there. She put her dad's name on there, and she had her telephone number and everything. And that's how he said, "Do you have a daughter named Debbie?"
Well, now, that leads to another question. Over the years, did you keep in touch with your crew or any of the guys in the POW camp? Was there any sort of reunions with either group?
Yes. There, with the crew, mostly by telephone. After the first month or so.
We went to Oklahoma to visit your co-pilot.
Co-pilot. And then New Jersey.
And we went to Florida to see your
he was a gunner.
Gunner.
They, this fellow up there on the far right is from Florida, and below him is from California. They're the only two left.
Oh, is that okay?
We don't know. We know. I think there's 2 or 3 that we never did find.
Oh,
one,
okay.
honey.
Well, Porter, and I forget.
But we've been to conventions with them.
Okay.
And they visited us, and we have visited with them.
It's a few years back.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
We were, the navigator and the bombardier and I were in the same prison camp together. The co-pilot spent most of his time in hospitals. And the enlisted men, we didn't see them until Lucky Strike. That was when already on our way home.
That was the name of the camp in France, right? They named all the camps after cigarettes.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what was it like, I'd asked you the question earlier, transitioning from civilian to military life. How was it the other way around, particularly after all you'd been through, getting back to civilian life? Was it much of an adjustment for you?
Not too much. I think the reason is I had so much time in the prison camp to be with myself and think about different things that it was the same way in civilian life. I still had, I didn't have too many acquaintances because most of mine were military and they were gone. It took quite a while to adjust to civilian life. But you do, you learn to adjust.
Did you see a different man come home than the one that left? And
Definitely.
what were some of the changes that you saw that?
He's introvert. He don't like to be in crowds, or he doesn't like to socialize. He loves to be with his family. He loves his family.
Was he like that prior to going out?
No, not at all. He was a party. He was a party animal. But he's changed.
And physically, was he quite a bit thinner?
He was thin. He had terrible nightmares. He would perspire. He'd wake up in the night and he'd be soaking wet. He choked me one night, pulling me out of bed. He thought it was his co-pilot. He was trying to get out of the plane, and he used to have terrible nightmares. And he almost went out of our bedroom window one night trying to get out of the plane, and thank God we had Venetian blinds. That was the only thing that saved him.
I got tangled up in him.
And he just, bless his heart,
it was quite a time before
he just,
the transition worked in. I even broke a lamp that was a floor lamp that was sitting alongside the bed. I swung over at it and broke it.
but he had a lot of problems.
I'm
Still
not the only one that had problems like that. Most of my associates in the prison camp didn't have treatment like the Japanese boys had.
Right.
Boys in Japan.
Yeah.
It was horrible. There were some places in Germany that were just as bad. The guys were beaten. And you hear about it when you get into the hospitals. And this marching, it was hard for me to believe. I was so fortunate that I went to my prison camp instead of another one.
That's kind of hard to say that you're in itself, to make that statement.
But I think it took a toll on him.
I was fortunate that she understood, my family understood, and I didn't think it would take as long to recuperate. But this gal, what is she, Linda?
She's a psychologist.
She's the head of this group, and it's about 5 years now, isn't it?
You've been going. They meet.
But it's only in the last 5 years that you've...
No, he's been going to VA for longer, but this was just a group. It's a group of veterans, like from World War II and Vietnam and Korea. And do you have any members of this war? Or?
Not yet.
But it's just of the
with my
three.
Group, it's,
and they get together and they talk about, their feelings and their experiences and.
But did the VA offer that earlier on? I mean, it's just...
Well, they did,
but he didn't know
they
about
did,
it.
but he didn't know about it.
See, and now the VA is trying to get it where soldiers have to, once they're released, should be examined. And see, it's a serious problem in some cases.
Sure.
But please don't believe all these stories that you hear about veterans not getting care. That is not true. That is not true. They have to seek it. The Army doesn't go to them. You have to seek help. And they talk about the homeless. Dad has sent a lot of men to VA that didn't even know they were entitled to.
I don't know if I told you about this one doctor that about my blood condition.
Yeah.
So I keep thinking that, boy, if I had been wounded, I wouldn't be here today.
But they saved his life at VA in Cleveland. And he was in there one time for a month and a half, and another month. And then he was in there recently, too.
When you listen to some of these stories that these veterans are telling, you find out that even before they go to the VA, they have been this way back when they were in the Army. Complainers and bitchers. We had so many of them. In the prison camp, like there was how many men in your combine. Before you know it, you know everything about them from the day they were born. Day in and day out.
Now, did you ever keep in touch with any of those guys at all? Was there any sort of reunions put together for various camps?
Yeah. I don't think
we belong to this barbed wire of Ohio. It's where nothing but POWs. And then once a year they have a convention, a national. And we've been to a lot of those. And then they have one locally. They meet once a month, but...
I don't drive anymore, and I don't know any of them who live near me. So I just read what news is sent out.
But he gets his dental, his eyes taken care of, his dental work.
Anything that I want.
Anything he wants up there.
You deserved it. You earned it.
Well, he earned it, but I'm just saying that when I see this and hear it on TV, it angers me because I know what good care they get.
Yeah.
And it's because they don't seek it. They don't want it.
Yeah.
Because I know once when he was up there, it was on Valentine's Day, and he had gone the night before, and they put him in a room with other veterans till they got a private room for him. So anyway, I baked cookies, and I took flowers and valentines up, and I thought it would cheer them up. And the one boy, he threw them at me. He just did not want them, and it really upset me. And I said to the nurse, "What is wrong with him?" She said, "It's his personality.
Yeah.
Nothing you do for him,
Yeah.
it doesn't make the man happy."
Yeah.
She said, "Just ignore him." And she said he was probably like that before he even went into service. But they give them excellent care.
Well, now, what after you got home and out of the service? What did you do? Did you relax for a while, or did you go back to work, or what was?
I had to go back to live. I went. Excuse me. I went right back to work. Could find a job. Let's see what the. I can't even remember now what it was.
You opened up a delicatessen. A deli.
7 days a week.
Oh boy.
And my brother
got out of the service.
Got out of the service, and he said he was going to go in business with me. He was here a week, and he says, "We're selling it." he is quite...
and then he went back into the service.
He stayed in retired.
Made a career?
He was a weatherman.
Oh, okay.
He went to India.
Oh, wow.
In March of '45, he and a group from Patterson Field flew across North Africa and set up weather stations all the way to India.
Wow.
And that's where he learned to drink. Yeah, he said his first sergeant brought him, when they first got over there, and brought them together and told them. They said he showed them a bottle of whiskey. And this is what you want to start at. Over in this heat.
Well, now, how was it for? Did your folks ever talk about after the war? You're in a prisoner of war camp. You got brothers all over, probably over the world. Did they ever talk about their feelings, what they were going through, or all of you ever sit down and talk about that? What they were thinking? Probably particularly your mother.
I don't think we ever did.
No, not with your mother. His father died while he was in service.
Oh, jeez.
And no, I don't think you ever talked over with your mother. The boys have. His one brother was in infantry. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. And then the one brother was in the weather. That's Dave. And Jack was in Signal Corps. And his brother-in-law was a sailor.
Oh, geez.
He was in the Navy.
We considered it.
He was in the Navy.
We still thought of him as in the family. But we let him go in the Navy. We asked him where he was. He says, "Hell, I don't know." He says, "I was down in the hold all the time the ship was at sea."
And all of them came home.
Oh, wow.
That is something.
It is, yeah. It is.
There are 5 of us.
So then, continuing on, you went on to have a career with the deli, or how long did you?
No, I kept the deli for about a year.
2 years.
2 years?
2 years.
And 7 days a week.
Yeah.
My brother says we're selling it.
He went back into the service, then he went to school, law school, while he was in there. He's an attorney now.
Okay. And what did you do after you sold the deli?
Where'd I go to work?
Went into dry cleaning.
Okay.
He just retired at 85.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I wish I wouldn't have. It's when you consider retiring, think about it seriously. The more fellows I talk to about retiring, they think now they could have gotten along, still working. Health-wise, they could be better. Yeah.
I don't think you ever talked it over. I doubt your mother even knew what you...
No, I never talked it over with her.
She didn't ask, but I wouldn't. He said he'd rather not talk about it. And we didn't for years.
Yeah, yeah. And then how many more children did you go on to have? You had, Linda was your oldest?
Uh-huh, Linda, and then we have 2 daughters and 2 sons.
Okay.
Planned it that way.
Yeah.
We planned it that way. And we have great kids and great grandchildren. And
oh, we've got a wonderful family.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
We just had a session last night, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mrs.
Your great nephew from Minnesota came, he and his family, and to see us yesterday.
Yeah, that's what you think. Not so much in the prison camp as after I got out. I'm going to realize how fortunate I am to have a family. That they may not know it, but I could fall back mentally and think about what I've got, how proud I am. Maybe that's what I was fighting for. I never know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we'll start to kind of wind down the interview, and usually this is one of my last questions I ask, but we're kind of on the subject. How did that period of time affect your life or change your... I mean, you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but how did that period of time affect your life or change your life, change your way of thinking?
I'll tell you, I was disappointed. And most of the people I met reminded me so much of these fellows in my room. After a while, you knew their whole life history. And some of them got to the point where their stories changed. And you realized it, but you wouldn't say anything because day in and day out you're with these people.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if we were playing poker and a guy would cheat, you'd know, well, this guy's going to cheat, be careful of him. Or this guy would tell you a story, then the next time it was a different story. And there were fellows that you know who to pick out that you want to be with. Religion was very seldom.
Is that right?
Very seldom a topic.
Would they have services and such?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was one Catholic padre. He was captured at the British the first time they tried to invade France.
Okay. Uh-huh.
He was captured. And they had other denominations. Now, we had Jewish services. This buddy of mine had gone to school. He wanted to be a rabbi, but he changed his mind and went to law school. Well, he got, we would have our services after the Catholic services, and we changed things around in the auditorium. And we were surprised that we were allowed to hold services.
Yeah.
Now, in one instance, we were introducing ourselves to each other, and I mentioned my name, and this fellow says, do you have relations in Akron, Ohio? He says, yeah, I have cousins. And he mentions a name. He says, I married her.
He asked, do you know any Magilavys in Akron? And Dad says, I am a Magilavy.
He was knocked down over France, and he was with the underground. And in one of their moves, the underground, somebody in the underground squealed on him, and the Germans captured him. He had been several months a prisoner before he got to camp.
Huh.
And that was a little different.
Was there any other incidences where you ran into people from home or?
Yeah. This guy comes around our camp, and I could hear him outside in the hallway, and it says there's somebody from Akron in this room, I hear. And he came in. You know Shorty Fulton? He was the Fulton Airport, Akron City Airport. It was his property that he sold to Akron, City of Akron, to become the municipal airport. He was an old man. And he came in there, and I said, for God's sake, Shorty, what the hell are you doing here? He says he went for a ride on a mission. He was I think he was a major then. As old as you are, you shouldn't have been on this. He says, I went for a ride. Oh.
Well, like I said, we'll start to wind down the interview. I know there's stuff I probably didn't ask you. If you think of anything I didn't ask you, or any stories that you left out, either one of you that we'd like to include on the tape, that any topic that we'd forgotten to talk about or I hadn't asked you about.
There are so many after you were gone.
Yeah, oh sure.
I will think of
that always happens. Yeah, yeah, by all means.
I hope you did get the information you wanted.
Well, like I said, this is for you, so yeah.
Oh, it's for him. Well, good. I said a few little off.
No, that's all right. I'll forgive you, sweetheart. No, I'm glad to get it out. I have tried, I don't know how many times, to sit down and write. I get so far, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I leave out so many things. I'm scratching out and writing again. And then when I think about it, I say, hell, I should have done better. Yeah, I don't get things in that should be gotten in. More people should know about our life, not only mine, I mean about wars. To me, war is hell. And,
I was going to ask you if you experienced what your thoughts on war, particularly the previous the conflicts we've been in since then. How and in today's war, actually, what if that?
How horrible. Yeah, even going back, I go back to the Civil War. How horrible. And in the previous wars, even in prehistoric wars, they stand up there and they shoot at each other.
Yeah.
That's how they win. They kill more guys than they kill.
Yeah.
How horrible for a family. Years ago, when you went to war, well, if you were lucky, you didn't get shot.
Luck.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I had a great-grandfather that fought in the Civil War, and he was for the North, and his brother was for the South. The South, and after the war, they never spoke to one another.
Wow.
And I says it breaks up families too.
Yeah.
I wish something could be done with the schools to bring out how horrible, to teach more about wars.
Maybe it would help these young people.
Yeah. Ooh.
Well, Manny.
It isn't a perfect world, is it?
No.
Well, I am so grateful to you. I think this is what he needs.
Well, that's wonderful.
He's housebound, and he does not like to get out.
Yeah.
This is what he does all day.
No, I don't.
Almost. You get up to eat and go to the bathroom, honey.
Well,
I mean, I think he needs this to get it out.
Good. Well, I want to thank you for sitting down to tell your story, but more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
We've got something to serve for. More people should realize that. What those people have in Europe.
Sad thing, isn't it, this war?
Yeah.
They don't even call it a war, though, do they? So senseless.
Well, thank you, Manny.
Okay, the top left was our top turret gunner, Cliff Spear. The fellow next to him was our radio operator named Porter. The fellow in the middle there is Horner. He was our waist gunner who was killed in the air. And next to him is Shirley Gray.
No,
Who?
it's Jake.
Jake Gray, okay. He was our tail gunner. And this fella here was our
Shirley.
ball turret operator.
Kavanaugh.
Next to him is Kavanaugh. He is one of the two that are still living. Right below him is the bombardier, Harvey Greenfield. He's still living in California. Next to him on the left is Peter J. O'Toole, was our navigator. Then to the left of him was Joe Hayes, was the co-pilot. And then myself. Myself, Harvey Greenfield, and Kavanaugh are the only three living from the crew. This is represents the awards I was given. My daughter, youngest daughter, made this up and placed them in the positions they're in. That's about all I can say.
The original wings you got today, you got your wings.
Yeah, it looks like you got the Purple Heart.
Purple Heart.
Yeah.
And there's
Good Conduct Medal. Can you tell them all of
No, I can't.
how about the picture of the two of you? Do you remember when that was taken?
That was taken the day he got his wings. And
When I graduated flying
in
school.
Albany, Georgia.
Yeah, those were my first wings. Oh, that was when I was in basic flying school in Augusta, Georgia. About halfway through my flight training.
Yeah.
Gee, where the hell was that taken?
Augusta. Georgia.
No, that was
Albany.
Albany, Georgia, when I graduated flying school.
The day you got your wings, right?
May the 28th.
And Billy, you said you were able to pin the wings on?
I pinned his wings on him.
And that was in May of 43, or 44.
43, honey.
43, and in February of 44 is when I was shot down.
That was taken on our wedding day,
What day
August
was
the 7th, 1943.
Been that long?
December, it's going to be 67 years, Dad. Okay, Dad.
That is a P-17. That was the first airplane that I flew. The next one is a B-17. That is my combat airplane.
Now, on the 9 missions you flew, did you have the same plane? And if so, were you one of those planes that you named and had a...
No.
Oh, okay.
For 5 missions, I flew an old plane. And the last 4 missions, this was a brand new airplane. We didn't have it named yet.
Okay.
He was going to name it Lindy. Linda.
Now, the third one is a flight trainer that's still used today. Was in my advanced flying school.
Now, were you given the choice to go single, or
Yes.
And you decided to go with a bigger 4-engine?
I always did want to go the
Oh, okay.
4-engine. My instructor worked me into being able to fly. That is a very famous plane. that AT-6.
And then
The next one is a twin engine. That is an AT-10. It has given us prior to moving into the B-17.
Now,
That's a Vultee vibrator because it vibrated so much. It was then called a basic trainer. It is not used anymore today. This is a picture of the B-17 that I flew in. It was a gift ride from my family. It brought back memories. After flying in it for about a half hour, I realized that it would not take me very long to get at the controls of this plane.
after all these years, huh?
Right.
I'll be darned. And the family went in and bought you a ride for Father's Day, right?
Yes, they did.
and your two nieces.